Welcome to our S&OP Ask the Expert series.
Doug, today's question is, why use a standard format for the Executive S&OP presentation?
Over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with many different kinds of businesses. We've worked with companies that are in the high volume consumer products all the way to engineer to order, real complex projects. And in all of those cases, when I sit down with the senior executive, one of the first questions that I ask them, simple question, is your current process working for you? When it's not, often their number one complaint is that I don't walk out of our executive S&OP meeting or whatever meeting is the culmination of their monthly process with clarity on what the plan is or what the story is. Sometimes there's a couple different plans that have been presented, and it's not clear that what action should be driving out of that process. And the main reason for that is the way that the data gets presented in the meeting. So out of all of this experience, I've long been an advocate of standardizing and simplifying the S&OP family presentation, presenting a single story for the family that incorporates demand and supply and the buffer decisions that should be part of every S&OP discussion. So let's dig into why this standard presentation. And there's four reasons that I look at for this. The first is that standard presentation focuses the story. The second one is the standard presentation supports a concise S&OP meeting. The third one is that a standard presentation makes it so everyone can understand, so there's no translation required when you move from family to family. And finally, and ultimately, a standard presentation supports sustainability of the process. So let's circle back and let's go through those four items, and hopefully that'll give you a good understanding of why I'm such a proponent of using a standard presentation. So what's the first one? Using a standard presentation forces the story. Now, I'll caveat this by saying it does need to be the right standard presentation. The 5-section sheet that I'm an advocate of, which really includes the 5 main elements of an S&OP plan. So our bookings, our order inflow, our shipments, our order outflow, our backlog, our production, and our inventory presents a complete picture for the family. And when I get this complete picture, and I include in that also your capability and those targets for inventory and backlog, I can identify whether the plan that we have is workable, and I can also identify the risks around that plan. And one of the beauties of this simple presentation is that when I look at those 5 elements, the math, as I like to say, has to make sense. So for example, if I look at my inventory, I can take my previous inventory, I can add my production, I can subtract my shipments, and I get my next inventory. And that means that as I go forward, I can actually do a projection of what my future inventory is going to be. If my production is less than what my capability is, and I'm still able to maintain an inventory level that I'm planned, then I have a plan that's going to work from a balance standpoint. If things don't add up, then I have to question, do we have a valid plan? So having that right presentation allows us to focus the story, what's going on. Second item, standard presentation supports a concise S&OP meeting. Let's just use a simple example. You want to get through your executive S&OP meeting in 1.5 hours. Let's say that you have 15 families. If I do the math, that allows me about 6 minutes per family in my presentation. That's not a lot of time. And so I need to get that story for the family together in a really concise manner, and using a standard format really helps me do that. Now, You're not going to spend the same amount of time on every family. Sometimes some companies will not be presenting all their families in the S&OP presentation. However, it's good to think about it in those terms of saying, if I want to get through in an hour and a half, I need to have some way to do this concisely. And a standard presentation really supports that. The other nice thing about a standard presentation is that it helps you avoid slide creep, like adding additional slides for the family as you go through, because the story is really packaged up the same way each time. So standard presentation supports a concise S&OP meeting. Number 3, a standard presentation makes it so everyone can understand what's being presented. So when you move from family to family, there's no need to mentally translate from a set of graphs or data that's presented one way for this plant and presented a different way for another plant or another family. So by driving to a standard presentation, then I don't have to ask everybody in the meeting to translate a different view of the data. Now, in order for that to work, the data has to be self-explanatory, so it can be reviewed ahead of time, and the data needs to be defined. The beauty of driving a standard presentation is you can come up with a standard dictionary, so everyone knows when I say a booking, this is what I mean. When I say a shipment, this is what I mean. Now, there might be some subtle nuances family to family, but you define that ahead of time. So it makes it so everyone can understand the process, no translation required. And finally and ultimately, a standard presentation will support sustaining the process. People move in and out of organizations all the time, and this is especially true, a challenge for S&OP when the executive leadership or key players that are the leaders as part of the process move on to another meeting and you bring new people into your organization. When that happens, that's often where we see the process starts to crumble a bit. But by driving to a standard presentation and having a way to incorporate those new executives into your current presentation, you can actually build a sustainable management process, which ultimately is one of the things we're trying to do with S&OP. So, as you've heard me say before, I'm very much an advocate of that standard presentation. I look at that really for 4 reasons. It focuses the story, supports a concise S&OP meeting, it makes it so that everyone can understand the process, and ultimately supports sustainability for your S&OP process. So hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any other questions you'd like to send to us, we'd love to answer them and put in one of our future videos. Thank you and have a great day. Thanks for watching today's video. Subscribe to our channel for more on implementing S&OP. You can learn more about how DBM can take your process to the next level by visiting our website, www.dbmsys.com. Thank you and take care.